Yo, what's good? Can't hear you. Connecting to audio. There you go, bud.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Yeah, you look good too. Bonus.
I can't. Can you hear me okay?
Can you hear me?
I can't hear you.
You can't?
No.
Fuck.
Right. Good to see you, though.
Thanks. You too. Thank you. Fuck. Now, can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Hello, can you hear me? No? Can you hear me now?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Okay, stop this. Now can you hear me?
Now I can hear you.
Okay, I got a warning sign. It feels like an echo. I got a warning sign that I'm running out of computer space, so we might have to have a part 2 to this conversation a little later.
And that's okay as well.
I think we're recording, yeah? You want to record it on your side too, just in case?
Sure. Let me see.
Just hit that round button at the bottom. Whoa. I'm so tech-tarded. I grew up kicking a soccer ball, not doing this shit.
Same with me. Let's see.
My kid's not here to help me.
All right, good.
All right, let's blast this out, and hopefully we'll get something on tape. We got about 3 minutes in here so far, so this is tantalizing audio for the listeners. Excuse me. I'm feeling sick still. I'm going to do my little sponsors ad and then the intro to the show. Welcome people to the show, and then we'll get into it. I've never heard your last name said out loud.
Belal.
Belal.
Belal, yes.
Ba like a B-A?
Yep.
Belal. Nope. Say it one more time.
Belal.
Belal,
yes. B-E-L-A-L.
I'm going to just say Foos.
Yeah, Foos is fine.
They can read it on on the screen or whatever. All right. Which one's which? What am I doing here? All right. Quiet on the set, kids. Damn, that's a big Starbucks.
It is. It's my venti just coffee.
I've got off coffee and I feel good about it. Do the mushroom tea now.
That's good.
Yeah.
You look good. Nice to see you. It's been a while.
Yeah, too long. Oh,
yeah, way too long.
I got to talk to you about Mark at some point too. I don't know what the hell happened to that relationship, but he's just let's talk about it now before we get started. He just seems like he's so aggressive still, and constantly going from club to club to club to club and screaming how valuable he is. But yet, his resume's got 30 different jobs on it. Know what I'm saying? Yeah,
it's it's been interesting. The soccer industry is also not forgiving. It's it was really for him and I working together was was good until it got to kind of the accountability piece in terms of my positionality versus him being a mentor, and I don't think that meshed very well. And I was still really young and naive at the time in my leadership skills, and it was just unfortunate because I have a great deal of respect for him, but also it was very unfortunate. I was in a situation where I was supervising the work he was doing, and I think some egos got in the way, both of us in a way, But it was yeah, so yeah, and I haven't really talked to him. I've been removed from the soccer industry for a little while now, but so I've moved on to
Nice.
other things. So yeah.
Are you living out in Federal Way or somewhere else?
No, I live in Des Moines, so I'm in
Same thing.
the Des Moines area. Yeah. I love that area, man. It's been like it's where I started and where I've been, so it's been good. Yeah.
Federal Way Club, what happened to that? Did it merge with somebody, or is it still around? What's going on?
Yeah, it's now. I think I believe it's with PAC now under PAC
That's
Northwest,
right. That's right.
and they have Federal Way was as you know, it's been historically one of the prominent soccer communities, and just when I was there as a director, it was challenging to find sustainable programs and get support to advance the soccer to the next level. We were always a feeder club for WP or PAC because they're kind of the bigger clubs in the area, and for us to at the time, I think it was the DA. We presented our case to the DA, but it was not, yeah. So it's a whole different topic.
Yeah, soccer's nuts. Like, I cannot believe how affluent I have to be just to get soccer, and then I'm constantly disappointed with the coaching. I look at the turnover in coaching and the lack of mentorship with coaching, and good coaches. There's a lot of people with licenses that don't understand personal relationships with their players and that type of thing. It's it's frustrating, and like, we would have been in Portland for 2 games. He plays in 3 leagues plus EPD. It all costs money. We drive from around the backside from Bainbridge Island here to Washington Premier for 3 days of training, and constantly, like, I want to wring the coach's neck, but he's on his 5th coach in the club, and then I got excited because Roy Lassiter got hired. Then he had a huge fucking gambling problem, and then he didn't show up to practice. He would go do personal instruction, take that money, and immediately go to the casino instead, and he wouldn't even show up for practice.
It's amazing.
Yeah, stupid as fuck too. And I look at he's in the UW College ID program, and then I don't know if you know Matunda.
I know Matunda really well. Great dude. Yeah.
But he's 1 in a million. He's that unicorn. I don't have access to him. So Vincenzo's in a training session with Matunda, and he's struggling because he hadn't seen what a proper session would look like for 15 years of his life. And now it's like I go back and I correct things one-on-one with him, but I'd never get involved with the coach, never speak up for my son, because as I told him, you got to be undeniable. You make your own path. And he's on the second team, but he's been the captain for 3 seasons now, leading scorer. He plays a lot of meaningful minutes. And the other team, I think they played 18 games last year in the first team, and there's 25 people on the roster.
Yeah,
and he got 55 games playing in RCL and ECNL regional and the National League. So that's a better spot for him, even though the coaching's not as good. But him and John York didn't get along right off the bat. Vinny wants to play, and York wants to control kids. You got 24 hours to answer me, and you don't talk unless you're spoken to, type of shit. And it's like, where are you coming from?
The old school. There's definitely so the way I look at it is there's a shift in education and in society, and the soccer has always lagged
Yes.
even more because of because there's a need to there's kind of an old guard mentality and to resistance to change in terms of just what is culturally appropriate on the field, what is how players should interact with coaches. I don't think there's advancement there. People talk about licensing. U.S. Soccer does a lot of licensing programs, but it's rarely addressing the important stuff like mental health, like
Mm-hmm.
communication, like the importance of team engagement, individual engagement. And I think it's a bit too cutthroat for the kids now. Especially this tier system, which is really, I think clubs oversell it,
Yeah, for sure.
bigger for what it is, but that's just my opinion.
That used to be my joke. Like, why did we go to San Diego to get our ass kicked when we could just go down the street to Federal Way and get our ass kicked? Like
Yeah, why?
Nagel's team beat us 7-1. Why are we going to San Diego?
Or why would you go to San Diego to play Seattle United?
That happened.
Hmm. Yeah, too many teams, many clubs,
We
and
we went to Portland to play Pack.
yeah. So, um, yeah, the soccer structure is still. I think there's some change. There's some change coming. I really believe that there's some change coming because it has to change, and it has to come from the top. U.S. Soccer has been complicit in this process of not addressing the root cause of why the national team hasn't performed at a high level, and that's essentially play equity is providing a space
It's
for people to play.
pay for play.
Yeah, yeah, and it's still socioeconomic driven, and people that can afford it. It's not regional as it should be, as you explained. You have to drive so far away to just
Mhm.
training, and I think there is and it's a corporation. These clubs are
Big
making a lot of
business.
money. It's
Yeah.
big business, and I don't think and I've been really vocal and outspoken in this sense, and but it didn't get me very far in this game. But it's okay. As you know, it's really, yeah. But anyway, that's my own opinion, and but it's been. I miss the game. I miss coaching, but it's good to coach my little son now. He's 6, so we just play for fun. So yeah,
Nice. That's a good time too. 6.
yeah,
Yeah. I was playing futsal until COVID hit. I miss it so much. I got a gym membership, but I barely go. Other than take a sauna and shower in between. Getting from A to B. But I miss futsal so much. And then I was looking into because this last weekend he was working out for Gonzaga and it snowed, so they moved 100 kids onto the basketball courts. And it was just such a nightmare. And I was looking at all the mistakes and how they're amplified in such a small space. And make one mistake, it's over. And I remember thinking, I just need one little mistake from this guy and I got a goal, And then I started looking into futsal and like the Seattle futsal, and I think Pac had a little bit of futsal. They just continued it, over COVID. And
yeah.
it's a lifestyle other places. When I was in Barcelona, there's futsal courts in between the parking stalls.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Street soccer, futsal, any practice outside of the structured practice of the clipboard and the pen and
Yeah.
the stigma of a B and C team is not. Remember, we used to play indoor, like the drop-in indoor. That
Yeah.
was some of the
Ever.
best, most creative soccer. With Chris Scotty and some of those folks that are just
There's
in
an
the
old
community.
name.
Yeah, but that was something that resonated from my experience, and I think I learned more from that experience than I had playing. And it's just being yourself and embracing that I was, I never passed, right? And I embraced that then. But you go into another space and they kind of condition you to do things that are against your nature, and you lose
Mhm.
part of your identity as a player, and you conform to a way of play at such a young age,
Yeah, get this
and you
ball
lose
off my foot.
yeah. So it's that was really something that I think futsal brings a bit of value there of people just being creative and being on the ball more so than 9-year-olds wanting to play like Barcelona, which is kind of the trend these
Yeah.
days. And we've seen it in the World Cup.
Well, we see all these
possession
like
doesn't win.
Barcelona academies pop up in Arizona and Valencia's in Seattle and stuff like that. And you see two guys smoking cigarettes sitting on their butt collecting a check as coaches, and you're like, what the hell is that? And I think also kids don't call each other up and say, hey, let's go play some pickup at Green Lake or something. That just never happens. That drives me insane. Why do I have to drive to Tacoma when you got guys playing for PAC right here on the island and you got older players and all that good stuff?
Yeah.
All
Absolutely.
right,
Futsal is much needed. So much needed.
let's get this rocking before I run out of space on my
Okay.
silly computer.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Blue Canary. The bird has landed on beautiful Bainbridge Island, conveniently located at 499 Madison Avenue. ASE Master Technician Clint Ramsey brings over 15 years of experience, award-winning diagnostic skill, and a desire to reinvent the automotive repair experience. Schedule an appointment online at bluecanary.biz or call them today at 206-451-4220. I got something for your mind, body, and soul. I got something for your mind, body, and soul.
You have found the Bystander Podcast. Now here's your host with the most, Tiny Tim.
What's good, Podcastville? Happy generic time of day to you. I want to give a shout out to Tideland Magazine for sponsoring the show, Sound Reprographics in the Pavilion, and, of course, Blue Canary Auto. This month, we are also accepting warm coats at Blue Canary Auto, and we will be passing them out to the homeless people in Seattle over the holiday season. So if you're in the neighborhood, got an extra warm jacket, I know there's plenty of people that could use it. Today, longtime friend, my favorite Algerian, probably the only Algerian I'm tight with, Fawzi. What's going on, man?
Not much. Nice to be here. Nice to see you as well and share the space with you. So thank you for having me here.
It's really good to see you too. I was thinking about you this morning when Morocco pulled off the unbelievable game and beat Portugal in the World Cup. Morocco's pretty close to Algeria, correct?
Yes, it shares a border with Algeria, and essentially that whole region, Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, historically was one country until the colonization, and it was there's some. So the name of the countries now are called the colonial borders, so they're really not recognized by the folks there. So it's essentially all one country, so you have people that have family in Morocco and Algeria, and a border that was created in historically in the back in the early 1900s, and now it's in the 60s. There was most of those countries and got independence, and those colonial borders remained. So I was rooting for Morocco as well because it's there's a lot of similarities of the way I grew up and my culture and seeing that in that. So yeah.
And your flags are similar, aren't they?
Fairly similar. You see the star is and the Morocco has a star in there, and it's the Maghreb star, which is the area used to be called the Maghreb, the Arab Maghreb, and it's also you see crescent and stars are very common in Muslim flags. So in Muslim countries, so they have that flag there.
So we get a little history lesson, because I don't think I know all of Africa. I know Algeria's pretty close to the same size as Congo. Is it the largest African country?
Yeah, Algeria is the largest African country. It's predominantly desert. It's about 80% the Sahara Desert, and then you have like the So if you go from northern Algeria is essentially the coast, the Mediterranean coast, and then if you go about 20 miles south, then you hit the Atlas Mountain Range, and then it's the Sahara Desert. And the original people of the region are called Berber people, which are kind of the original people that lived in the Atlas Mountains. My family's from those tribes, and I grew up in orange fields. We grew oranges there, and Algeria was a French colony for a long time, and it remained. It's still somewhat controlled by the French in many ways, economically, and the new colonialization morphed into a different, not present colonialism, but it's also economics and cultural and so on. So it's very heavily influenced by the language of France. French is the predominant language there. The kids study in school, and so it's.
I thought it was you guys spoke more Islamic than French, and then there was some Berber. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, Berber is a language of the region as well, and a lot of Muslim countries, some Muslim countries speak Arabic as the prominent language, and that's also a language that we spoke there, but it's not the business language. So if you were to go to Algeria and want to start a business, then you need to know French. And if you are in a university, then you need to know French. As a matter of fact, the French education system is implemented in Algeria to this day. So very, very similar. And there's a close proximity between the two countries. Essentially, up to the late 60s, Algeria was considered like a state of France, kind of like Puerto Rico is here with the U.S. or there's a lot of influence there.
Yeah, Puerto Rico seems to be our redheaded stepchild that we don't pay attention to a lot. I'm like, I wanted to talk to you because last time I was talking to you, we were talking about Western Hemisphere and not only the cultural bias, but media. And now that I'm loosely based in media myself, I read a lot, and I try to, fact check my sources and get as many sources as possible. But I'm constantly amazed at what's omitted, especially in Arab countries, and how we perceive Muslim people still to this day after 9/11. And it's much different than my experiences ever. But then when I read about it, whether it be CNN or, BBC does a little bit better, but Fox and CNN and everything that's coming through my pipes, as my mother used to say, that's malarkey. How do you, let's back up a little bit. About how long ago did we meet and you came to America? You were just a kid back then.
Yeah, I moved here when I was 14 years old in 1994 and almost 1995. And I wasn't connected. My uncle came here a few years before me. There was a civil war going on in Algeria at the time, and my dad wanted me to be safe, so he brought me here, and I stayed with my uncle. I landed in the Des Moines area, so I went to Mount Rainier High School, and then later Highline College, and then went on and played soccer in the University of Mobile in Alabama. And then I came back to Seattle I was involved here in soccer. So
was Alabama a culture shock for you?
Alabama was definitely a culture shock, and it was that during 9/11, which was a really interesting time for folks that look like me and are from my background, because it's getting better, but the rhetoric towards people from that part of the world, we've always been struggled with this identity of being Muslim American identity. Has been really kind of you're either, if you're Muslim, then you're anti-American. That's the theme that we've seen. Mm-hmm. My uncle came here as to give you an example of that. My uncle came here with his company. He was an airplane electrician, so he came here with Boeing to do like a training for some of the planes that Algerian Airlines bought, and he ended up staying. He kind of risked it all and stayed and worked at a donut shop and buy Dunkin' Donuts by Highline College, so because he wanted a better life. And so when during the time of 9/11, his colleague at work, by then he was working for Alaska Airlines in the baggage claim, and he used to always read. He's fascinated about planes, so he was reading a book that is about the 727, and it took one colleague to call and report him to authorities, and the FBI shows up to our house, and this is
Wow.
when we talk about profiling. It was really traumatic, and to this day, folks have been picked up from the Muslim community and got thrown in Guantanamo, which is essentially still exists, with no trial or no. So just because of that Muslim identity. So there's always been a kind of growing up, I felt like I needed to hide that quite a bit, to be honest, just because I didn't feel like I belonged in this community. So it kind of affected me growing up and being able to be my authentic self here. And now I work in diversity and inclusion. So I do this work of belonging,
Yes.
which is really ironic. So
No, it's great.
So that's kind of how I ended up here and where I am right now.
And did you know English prior to coming?
No English. So I learned English through people like you that welcomed me and engaged me in soccer every day. And you, Chris, Scotty, Mark, and a bunch of folks that were, that took me around because I think I was an okay soccer player back then. So
Yeah, it was funny because Pepe Fernandez and Walter Smetzer did something similar when I was, I think 13 to 15, right around there. They put me on the men's team with them and kind of held my hand. And I remember going, man, this kid's fast. He's quiet. He doesn't talk back to me. That's probably because he didn't know the language. And you were always smiling and scoring goals. So I think it was around that time when you were still a high school kid that I was like, come on. Anywhere I'm going, you're going.
Yeah, that was very, I always appreciate that and go back to think about the folks that kind of helped me feel, be part of this soccer community.
So do you know 4 languages? Do you know French, Arabic, Berber, and English?
I don't know Berber as well. I know some words, but French, Arabic, and English. Algerian is kind of a dialect. It's between French and Arabic that is constantly evolving. Dialect meaning a language that you cannot write. It's just a way of speaking. So and that's where we speak at home. My wife is also from Algeria, and we have 2 kids, 6-year-old Zaid and a 18 months old Ferris, and we speak that at home. So.
Did you do baby signs with the kids?
Yes, absolutely.
I kind of figured that when my audio wasn't working and you were looking at me and picking up what I was laying down there. Back to the inclusivity and how we view and get our news. What do you think the main problem is with that? And is it just unknown bias? Is it a cultural bias? Is it how we, as broadcasters and news outlets and stuff, is this how they are told to talk and to, in some ways, target certain groups?
Yeah, I definitely think it's there's 2 types of bias. There's obviously explicit bias, which is this plain all racism and really charged moments when you say things that you shouldn't say. I don't think it's that. I think it's implicit bias, which is kind of a unconscious bias. It's also referred to sometimes. It's a way that people have been conditioned socially to think of other groups, and that's been something that is part of the culture. If you look at the history of Hollywood, for example, is a perfect example. If you think about the movies and you go back and think about the movies in the 80s, for example, how they portray Black men, for example, as menacing, as dangerous, as, these stereotypes have been built in society for so long, and people normalize them after a while. And it's just, so I think that's where those biases come from. The Arab persona has been viewed as angry people that don't smile very much.
Yeah,
and you see that.
very one-dimensional. I think it was
Yes.
Back to the Future. Somebody that wasn't even Arabic was playing an Arab, and he was just screaming in the movie. And like, there was so many incidents. Somebody broke down the film. I think that was the film, and showed the betrayal of what we think Muslim culture is like.
And
Go ahead.
The biases are, but they're also fueled by the media, right? And I think, and I've been really critical of the commentating during the World Cup recently, and I've wrote a couple blogs about it, because it hasn't been as even. There's a study actually that was done, Tim. You should look this up. It was comments from the English Premier League, the Spanish League, and the French league, I think, in the Bundesliga, and they took all the comments that were said during these games, and they broke them down into what types of comments in terms of intelligence versus athleticism, and they compared the racial perception, that the biases that go with people darker color being faster, being stronger, being so a lot of attribution to the good things that happen in the game have been attributed to more so to athletic ability when it's a black person or person of color, versus white, which was grit, hard work, intelligence, and so on. So we see those common themes show up in the World Cup, actually, after Mbappe scored his second goal in the game. I think, can't remember who they were playing against. It was, it'll come back to me, but actually one of the commentators, Fox News commentators, said Mbappe is superhuman. So there's still that kind of a perception that people of color have this. There's a lot of attribution to athletic ability more so than intelligence. And before he was ripping on him for not coming back on side, for being lazy, this. We've seen this in the soccer world. So these biases have been kind of normalized for so long, but I think it's time for some folks to call them out. But in turn, So
I mean, I never got paid enough to play defense, so that was always my excuse when somebody told me to run back. In Mbappe's defense, he is lightning fast. But I remember a comment Lexi Lawless said about the Netherlands team, that they had so much height. He just kept harping on the height. Sad news. Did you hear that Grant Wall passed away?
I did. I
crazy.
heard that. That is crazy. I saw that in that's just really unfortunate, because he's done a lot in promoting, especially the women's game. I think he's been very brought a lot of issues that the bias, the gender bias issues in the sport, as we've seen. That is a tragedy.
Yeah, I think he's covered 8 World Cups, and he was only 48. Died of bronchitis, of all things. And was constantly going into the media medical tent. But he said a lot of people were sick over there, but not COVID-wise. So it's kind of unusual that bronchitis got you.
It's amazing how, that was unfortunate to hear. And
Yeah, I'm sorry. I took a left turn on you, didn't I?
No, that's
brought it crashing down. There's definitely stereotypes, and you brought up the gender bias as well. I mean, inclusion means a lot of different things. It's not just person of color. It's female, male. It's how one country treats women versus another country treating women. It's hard. How do we get all these cultures to start respecting everybody as equal as possible?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's some, we talk about diversity is a fact. We always say in the space that I work in diversity inclusion, we say diversity is a fact. So you're going to come across diverse people, whether it's racial, whether it's gender diversity, whether it's ethnicity, whether it's religious beliefs. So the spectrum of diversity is big. But once you have a kind of a superiority lens that is focused based on what everyone should be seeing things through, then it becomes a supremacy issue. And I think sometimes when you talk about diversity through a lens of a Eurocentric lens, which is essentially what Europeans' values should be like, then you're dismissing an entire Southern Hemisphere that has different cultures, right? And different ways of life. And I think sometimes then that becomes that lens might not be inclusive of others. So there has been a lot of othering. When I say othering, that means saying that we're better in this. And we've seen this, and it's so dangerous because it justifies war. The whole war, every war in the Middle East was done in the name of democracy. But if you go back and look at those countries, they are far worse than they have ever been. Like if you look at Iraq, if you look at Syria, if you look at Libya, if you look at Afghanistan. So but we justify that through othering, through saying, oh, we have a better way of life. We need to solve women's rights in Pakistan. That comes up really often, for example. But if you think about it, women's rights here in the U.S. are awful. There's women still don't get paid as well as men here in the U.S.
Yeah,
women
Roe versus Wade.
Yeah, so I think it's that othering piece, and also a supremacy way of looking at how we should control other cultures. It's a deflection. There's a lot of call outs for human rights violations for Qatar to host the World Cup. Last year we had kids in cages in at our borders. So when you talk about human rights issues, but to our East people that grew up in the Eastern culture, it comes across like, oh, those lives do not matter as much. That's them. So we've dehumanized. They've been dehumanized for so long that those lives don't matter as much. We've seen that controversy happening often. So most of the European countries actually that have criticized Qatar for human rights abuses have really rigid immigration policies. Like they are actually, there's videos of France and Spanish Coast Guard folks shooting rafts of people that are trying to get to their countries as refugees. There was a really clear distinction between the Ukrainian refugees being able to get through some of the borders during the war than African refugees, and I think that shows that that bias has been exposed many times. And Qatar has had terrible human rights violations in terms of how they treat their immigrants, but they went through a major reform that you don't really hear about. They actually, my sister and her husband are actually immigrant workers in Qatar, and they make 3 times as much, pretty much 10 times probably as much money than they would back home in Algeria.
Because his average salary is $100,000 in Qatar.
Yeah, and they do really well, and despite they're not as equal in terms of status than Qatari citizens. Qatari citizens are very wealthy. It's a wealthy country,
Why do you think so many immigrants died working on the World Cup, though?
Yeah, I don't think it's. I think they've died because the heat. It's awful. So I'm sure there is, just as much as and just as much as people in our farms here die from Latinx community. So there's really a lot of parallels in that. So I don't think the amount. I think that's what comes to people's minds when we talk about. And I'm not justifying human rights violations by Qatar by any means, but I know that they have done, since the World Cup was awarded to Qatar, with all the controversies, the rhetoric that's been used as one of the justifications why Qatar shouldn't have a World Cup. Another one was they don't have a soccer history. Well, when the U.S. hosted the World Cup, they didn't even have a league, right? At that time, in '94, there was no professional league, and neither did South Africa, which is a predominantly white country. So there are some holes in that logic, but that's what we keep seeing in the media that's portrayed as an anti. It comes across as an indirectly as an anti-Arab. It's them versus us. It's very divisive, and and then also the most interesting one is the LGBTQA community, right? And Qatar, this is what you don't hear. Qatar has a what they call the modesty law. So even if it's a male and a female, and they've been in public, caught in public or in public display of affection is forbidden, whatever your gender is. It's just a conservative society, but you don't see that portrayed. You just see the other aspect of it that is very, I think so there is some misinformation, but also it creates more of of othering and or more of imposing our culture over the other culture, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and we seem to point fingers at certain cultures for atrocities and such, but I look at Pakistan, Afghanistan, who else? Where the UN says don't invade these countries, and we're part of the UN, and we jump in and invade these countries regardless. And for years, Iraq too. It's just an ongoing thing, and I feel like we're in the business of manufacturing guns in this country, and then we have to justify it by making some war up. And then I can't help but think, is it because we're such a predominantly Christian society versus a dislike for Muslim societies? Is that really what's making this happen? Or is it just I don't even know, because I feel like we call people out. Like you just had a great example of public affection, but we only hear about the LG. I need more letters in this acronym. It just keeps growing. AI plus, the whole shebang. Same-sex affection. Let's put it that way, and then I won't trip over my acronyms. But we go after these countries, and we cause all kinds of devastation. But then it's just frustrating. And the grinder thing is frustrating to me. Merchant of death for a basketball player. I don't know if it's a fair trade, especially when there's other people still incarcerated over there. And we're dealing with a country that's also, a war that we don't approve of. But it's predominantly white country, right? So do we feel like we can communicate for some blind reason? I don't know. Tell me more. You know the ins and outs of this fight.
Politically, it is, politics are about protecting geostrategic locations that you have investment in. The U.S. is not in Pakistan to help the Muslim women or liberate women. They're there for the mines. They're there for harvesting the minerals that we need, resources. Just like the colonization of Africa, which was essentially, it started where Europeans are sitting at the table and they're saying, hey, we need to get more resources. And they divided Africa up, and it hasn't been, France taking Algeria, for example. I'll use that example. My family has had a farm an orange farm for as far as generations. When the French came, they took over our farm, and my family became essentially servants for that family, in our own farms. So that happens. And so there's a lot of trauma for folks that are from that region. And not only that, they don't allow you to speak your language. They don't allow you to learn keep your religion. So there's a mass genocide. So that colonization period have ended in the 60s. And then after that ended, there's still control over those colonies geopolitically. And this is what's going on now. We're in a different era of colonization which is neocolonization is not physically there. It's controlling resources, it's trade embargoes. It's if the U.S. really cared about women's rights, they'll go to Nigeria, but not not Pakistan, not where the Suez Canal is. That region, the Gulf region, is really geopolitically is really critical for the U.S. because imagine having a ship of merchandise not being able to go through that canal. They'll have to go all the way around to get to where, so for trade, so that's something that folks, we don't think about much, or it's not talked about much when we talk about politics and how it affects the globe. And also so it's, so all the wars that we justify for oil and for resources, but there's no apology or reparation for those countries. It's really critical. So if you go in to destroy, if you look at Syria, Iraq is the oldest civilizations in the world. They had a library there with a wealth of knowledge that is the Mesopotamian civilization is one of the oldest ancient civilizations in the world, and to destroy it within days. Think about all the museums in Europe. My friend was just in Germany showing all these artifacts from that region. And that's looting, essentially taking stuff that doesn't belong to you and putting it in your own country with no accountability. So there's a lot of things that we don't think about, but the media makes those it's a way to justify things by othering other communities, by dehumanizing them, saying they're primitive, they're not, they don't live the right way, they
don't have the same values.
Yeah. So essentially what that is. Sorry, I kind of went on a tangent here,
No, please. That's why you're here. Go on a tangent. I think it's been highlighted a bit with Russia and the supply chain through Ukraine, that they're definitely in that war to control that area to make more money, and do their thing. It's super sad. But, I think some of this stuff, especially with the gender bias, it has to start here in America too. Like, we could go to Nigeria and help out, but we're not helping out the people here. We think of healthcare here, right? We're one of I think some ridiculous number. I think only 13 countries don't have free universal healthcare, and we're one of the richest countries around, and we can't take care of our own. You look here in Seattle with all the homelessness and mental issues going on. And reminder, got that warm jacket drive. Everybody, drop off your coat at Blue Canary. And I think we have to set the modeling here where, our group, my family, my neighbors, my community, my city, my state, stuff like that. How do you integrate those type of changes in your daily job?
Yeah. Very good question.
Can't send everybody to sensitivity training, right?
Yeah, it's, so I do a lot of work in equity. So equity is essentially kind of really including historical context when we're talking about where people are. And we've all seen that meme of like the three people watching the game, one with on top of the crates that are able to watch the baseball game. I think that meme's been very popular, and it's been reinterpreted and remixed many times. I think it's just kind of having people pause when it comes to policies and saying, okay, we're going to do some healthcare reform and address mental health in the BIPOC community, or address, so how do we go from an equity lens? How do we provide different issues? So a lot of different support for specific communities that need it. So equity versus equality is a very common topic that is talked about. In equality is giving everyone the same thing. Equity is saying, oh, this person needs this instead of this, if that makes sense. So trying to do that. I do a lot of bias training. I've been working with a lot of soccer clubs as well to kind of improve their biases in terms of how they view players or families or communication style or just to kind of make the place a little bit more safer for folks that are may not feel included. Some players that might come onto a team that there's not very many people that look like them or have the same values, and they might feel kind of a stranger and have to conform and leave part of who they are. And that's been my experience. So I'm passionate about that work. I've been many teams where where I felt like, okay, I have to fit in, I have to assimilate to these norms that really might be against my values, but I have to do it because in order to survive. So, and I think those are things that so that's the work that I do in the space, and also acknowledging. So it's important to start with acknowledging that, for example, that people are on occupied land. You know, there were folks that lived here before us, right?
Yes.
You know, so this is not just, there's, so the history of acknowledging the indigenous folks that lived here, that the land belonged to, is really important as well. So there's a lot of work in that sense. So from an equity standpoint, we try to bring the historical context into the work that we do, and be very intentional about highlighting inequities, and see how we can kind of bring everyone on the same level.
When it comes to diversity, do you encourage certain standards of hiring practices?
Yeah, there is sector. So diversity and inclusion work is there's a workforce diversity, which is essentially how you hire and how, and how you retain. And there are biases that we have on a daily basis based on how we hire folks. So so I encourage bias training. There are different types of bias. So I do some workshops around identifying biases that are needed. For example, conformity bias or affirmation bias is saying people might see someone that they can relate to, then or they have a similar story, then they're more likely to accept them versus someone that has a different story, if that makes sense. So definitely encourage that. And then also there is, which is the biggest one in soccer that we see, and I've been really critical of it, criticizing the Washington State Youth Soccer for not having enough people of color highlighted in their what's it called, Hall of Fame. If you see it, it's like 50 white men and 2 women, and then it's like there's no people of color that played soccer, But it's, at the end of the day, it's like what lens who are you bringing up? So diversity tends to exist at the lower levels of education, healthcare, but when you look at leadership and boards, it's not as diverse. So people are lacking that diversity. So there's that part, which is workplace diversity. I encourage companies to look at their practices from hire to separation, and seeing where there is opportunities to promote more diversity, not just to hire people and then let them just kind of swim or sink in a space that is, maybe not structured for them, if that makes sense.
Do you think diversity, equity, and inclusion should be taught at all workplaces?
I think so. I think it's moving in that direction. A lot of government organizations have started implementing this, and it's been more there since the summer of 2020, and since the death of George Floyd, equity has been vocalized, and it's been at the forefront of a lot of the work. So we've been hearing more about it in healthcare, in education, in all the sectors that government sectors, and some organizations do it, and they do it performatively, which is doesn't always work well. They say, "Hey, look at us. We have we call that tokenism, or look at me. I have I have my diverse people, so I'm done." So yeah, it's like we've known folks like this say, "I don't have my black friends, so therefore I'm not racist, or I don't have any bias."
Well, you have friends.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Right.
Exactly. So
I don't think I've ever said my black friend.
Yeah.
But another generation, like my mom's, she's always, that's Chris, the black guy that lives across the street. And I go, he's been there 10 years. We can just call him Chris now, Mom. But it's an uphill thing. And one thing I'm very happy for is that it does come through the education system with my son. My son is very inclusive and understands what it means to be inclusive, and he deals with a lot of heavy topics that just weren't talked about back in the day. I mean, mental health being one of them. Hey, can I take a day off? I need a mental health break, Dad. From school? What? Yeah, you can, and that's okay. And you see some kids, especially with COVID, really struggle with being accepted for who they are, whether they're going through hormonal change or not finding a thing of interest or a place to fit in. I'm really thankful that there's a reminder that, hey, that person with his head down, looking the other way, go say hello to him. Ask him what he's doing or her.
Absolutely. I think it's we just need to get the soccer environment up to that level as well.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
You've done a real good job not telling me the score of the France game. So I appreciate that. I got that tape, but the wife had to leave for a while, so she said wanted to watch it with me later. Overall, how do you think the World Cup has helped? Looking down the road here, starting with Brazil and Russia, it seemed like Brazil, most of the stadiums just became overran and not used, and they do have a soccer scene there. And I'm wondering, these beautiful, stadiums that are air conditioned at Qatar, are there going to be sports to even fill them after this is said and done?
Yeah, probably not. I don't think they will be, and that's a FIFA kind of a, sometimes we think about FIFA is probably one of the most corrupt organizations. No nonprofit should have $5 billion in a bank. Plus, So, however, it's there are some, the issue that's whether those stadiums will get used or not. That's definitely an issue, but I think I don't think they'll get used. Qatar does not have the population that would use soccer that much, or their league is won't be. But I know some of them are tents actually, which is kind of they might be able to take them down. I know that in terms of sustainability, they have been at the cutting edge of sustainability in terms of building, which is really underrated when you talk about the way they built those stadiums as well. But the other part of it is that's worth highlighting is the World Cup is important to highlight cultures, and I think folks went there, they were able to be part of a safe environment, even though there was no alcohol, and that's a cultural thing, and people did not like that at first. But it was also, people could do okay with a can hang on 90 minutes without a beer. I think they should be okay.
Gosh, you would hope so, right?
Yeah. So, and but I it's bringing awareness to an area. It's inclusive of an area that is but I think sometimes we're so quick to criticize the country versus the organization. This is a FIFA event, and many people put in a bid. I know the U.S., Canada, and Mexico are going to do it here. I don't think they'll have the resources to do a similar job in terms of pulling it off that way. It's going to take 3 countries to create this event with a lot of travel, and that hasn't been highlighted. Can you imagine all the teams in one time zone playing one game? That's also good for the players. That hasn't been highlighted. So there's a lot of pluses of
should be Seattle.
That event being there. Yeah, there you go.
All the games should be Seattle.
Yeah, just but unfortunately Qatar set a really high standard. So opening ceremony, everyone had a little gift at their seats. So I doubt that'll happen here. But Qatar is an extremely wealthy country. The Qatar citizens have been criticized for their soccer. There's only 2 million people in Qatar, and so it's really not a large country to produce enough players. That's one thing. The other part too is most Qatar culture is people are wealthy. They don't go to games. They probably watch it from home, or they have a different lifestyle. So when you criticize people for not being at games to watch, because it's just maybe they just live on a different, higher socioeconomic level that is not what we live on, because of the amount of wealth that's there, and that's really worth noting when we but all the other games have been sold out, and it's been a great support for for the Arab world, and normalizing the Arab world as a place that has been stereotyped so much. It's been in the media, in the TV shows, and Aladdin, for example. You know the song of the Aladdin song with the thief? Oh, so after we get off, you should just listen to the Aladdin song and see how many derogatory terms are there to describe people that look like me. But that's been the narrative for so long, right?
Right.
And it's
look at Disney.
A nice way to, yeah. So that's even Disney doing that. So it's really to bring to humanize the folks there, people, the hospitality of people. There are people that Qatar people that actually citizens that have provided food and coffee and any kind of meals for people that are waiting outside to go into games. So can you imagine that at CenturyLink, at all the restaurants, someone saying, "Hey, I'm going to buy all the food for the restaurants for all these people who are coming to games." That doesn't happen here. So so it's a different experience, and that's not highlighted. The hospitality wasn't highlighted, unfortunately, and the media keeps driving those narratives. And I'm hoping that that needle will shift, and and people have better experiences there. So.
Yeah, the American team said that they brought chefs and their food was awesome, and everybody was kind to them. It'd be kind of nice if these countries could align up with the Olympics as well. So, you had 2 events in 2 years, and you could probably use those stadiums for more.
Yes,
absolutely. This is the first World Cup in an Arab nation, correct?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
What's your favorite? Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was going to say Qatar in the mid-'90s was a desert, and that's something to think about, right? 1992, Qatar was a desert. That was, the British colonized Qatar. They're like, there's nothing here. As soon as they left, Qatar discovered oil, and they're like, oh, crap. We should have stayed a little longer. So they became one of the richest countries in the area, and that's kind of where all the wealth came from. So, yeah, I'm sorry you were asking me a question.
Yeah, I lost it.
Sorry.
Oh, no, I found it. I'm a little bit older than you. That's why I lost it.
No, not that much.
What's your favorite story of the World Cup so far?
Obviously, Morocco has been a good story. I have been following that team closely. And also the story that is not talked about as well is all the African coaches. All the African teams had African coaches. Historically, it's been the shitty coaches, excuse my language, that didn't do well in their own countries took an African team to develop it or develop that portfolio as a coach to go coach in a league. So this time, all the African coaches had young coaches that are from that country. They know the culture very well. They know
the language.
Nice. They know the importance of a Ukraine inclusive team. I think they've done really well. So that was one of the stories, one of my favorite stories. And also the opening ceremony was so, even though Fox didn't show it, I was so upset. There was more reference to inclusion and humankind and kindness in that part than it has ever been anywhere else. When we talk about that, it might be different because the last World Cup was J-Lo dancing naked on stage, but this time was different. It was a lot of references to inclusion. Morgan Freeman with a person with disabilities that was able to create this amazing dialogue and talk about inclusion, and that was dismissed as well. So that was my favorite story because I'm in the work of inclusion, and that's what I'm passionate about.
Mine's Japan. I thought the soccer that they played was incredible until they got knocked out, especially that second goal when the ball came over the guy's shoulder at a full sprint. He took it with one touch at the top of the foot and just buried it. That was sick. But then to find out that they stuck around and cleaned out the locker room, picked up all the trash, and then people in the stadiums had brought trash bags to clean the entire stadium. And they spent hours cleaning it up and leaving it better than they found it. And it's a cultural thing as well. Much like guns are a cultural thing here in America, but you're not going to see a lot of shootings in Japan. I think there's less than 10 per year at most. I'm like, these are the times where people are setting the example of how to be a decent human being and show kindness through solidarity and strength of actions. And I just thought that it's time for me to go out there and get a Japan jersey.
I agree. I think, and this isn't the first time. I think Japan did this at the previous World Cup as well. I think they've been known for being so humble, amazing culture. So
I forget the word for it, but kids are taught it immediately when they're young. If you're old enough to pick up the trash, you're picking up trash.
That's amazing. Absolutely, that was something that resonated, and showing off your culture and your values. That was really good.
So what you got planned for this upcoming year?
Yeah, just working on projects. I want to plan a trip. Family and I went to Istanbul last year. We had so much fun. It was one of the most amazing places I've ever been to. So I want to plan another trip in the spring to go there and visit and take the family and see an incredible part of the world. It's there's like a little bridge between Asia and Europe, and that's like in downtown Istanbul. It's pretty cool. You go to one side, you see a completely different culture, and the other side, it's a beautiful place. So that's what's positive that I'm looking towards. So
Morocco was always on my list of one of the next places I wanted to go, and now that we've seen them perform incredibly, it makes me want to go even more. But unfortunately, I got this kid that's draining my bank account with all his trips.
Yeah,
but he doesn't even have time to get a job to help pay out. Travel.
Soccer will be free one of these days soon in the U.S.
Yeah, hopefully in the next year or two. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to get out, send him to another country, a boarding school in Europe.
And what year is he now?
He's 15. He's a sophomore.
Okay, fantastic. It's a good year.
Yeah, every year's been good. I've been very blessed and thankful for his inclusion in our family. Let's put it that way.
Amazing.
All right, Foos, I appreciate the conversation. Let's have more of them more often. And if you ever want to highlight a project that you're doing or looking to support some other people in this fashion, you always have a platform here on the Bystander Podcast.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time and sharing this space. And I look forward to connecting with you soon. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I'm still young enough to chase you around a little bit, kick you in the leg. Who knows?
Let's get futsal going again,
Yeah, for sure. All right. I appreciate you so much. You've been listening to The Bystander. Be kind.
Thank you.
My pleasure. That was a good interview. You're a natural. You should get a job.
Oh, thank you.
Now let's hope this got recorded. If not, I'm going to go look for your recording. You're the first person that has decent headphones.
Oh, okay. That's good.
I have a studio, but I have this home studio as well. So I have the same equipment in both places. The other place has 5 microphones and a bunch of computers and stuff. This one here, I decided to get an Apple for the first time, and 3 days later it was at capacity for storage. And then I took it because it froze. I took it to Best Buy, and then I found some guy that said he could fix everything. And both of them are like, I don't know what's going on. I can't even get a cloud storage space on this thing. And I was just like, shit. I spent $2,000 on a computer that can't, have 2 songs and a podcast on it.
That's not good.
Hey, next time I'm at WPFC, I'm going to have you come do a player evaluation on Vinny.
I would love to. I would love to see him play.
Well, State Cup's coming up too, so.
Yeah, anytime you have games by Starfire, let me know. It's literally right down the street from me.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's kind of both Starfire and WPFC are about equal distance from Des Moines. True or not?
Yeah, I'm on the northern part, so literally Starfire is 5 minutes away. So right. I'm kind of north of the college, Highland College. So
Tell me a little bit of how you got a relationship with Matunda. Did you take some coaching courses? Did he coach with you?
Yeah, when I was, I met him when I was working with the 23s. He was one of the players for the Sounders 23s. That was kind of one of my first years working with Darren Sawatsky, and he was a player there. And I got a chance to connect with him. And actually, we were years ago. This is funny. There was an inclusion or like a retreat for diversity and inclusion. And I went through my work, and I go in there and I see Mutanda sitting down, like, hey, what are you doing here? And he's like, I came here with my wife or his girlfriend at the time. Like, yeah, she wanted me to come here. So it was so we attended a session together, and we kind of started talking about it. And yeah, but he's a great guy. Does a lot of amazing work. So I know he went to Columbus Crew, I think, for a while. Is that what he was? One of the MLS.
I don't know.
Academies. Yeah, he went and worked for an MLS academy and then came back fairly recently. And
I think he's at
and I think he's
Valor, whatever that is.
Oh, is he coaching at Valor? Okay.
I think he's the coaching director at Valor. Was that Tacoma or something?
That's in Kent. That's kind of it's literally Valor took over the Auburn and what's that area of Kent called?
Renton.
A little bit of Renton, Kent, and then Maple Valley area. Yeah, so that's he's there with that. Peter Hattrip is there, I think, as well. Remember Peter Hattrip?
Yeah, Peter actually sent me a note for my birthday, and so did Darren Sawatsky, which I don't think was really close with Darren. I met him at a Sounder party at the end of the season because my wife was playing with the Sounders, and he was playing. He played really well that season too. I think it was him and Storkson were up top, and Storkson was a great target player, and then Darren would run off him all day long, and he used to have really long hair and like rode a motorcycle to practice and shit, and always was mad. Like, and then all of a sudden he got into coaching, complete change of who he was.
Yeah, he's done really well. He's over, I think. Is he in Richmond right now or in Virginia?
Something like that.
Yeah, he's doing pretty well.
I wouldn't want to be out there though. I mean, if I'm not on the coast, I don't want to be there. I want to see water. I don't want to see a bunch of Republicans either, but I don't really like the Democrats either. I just want to get rid of the party system, and it'll be Fawzi versus Tim for president.
We'll see. That sounds good. It's now the soccer landscape has been. I'm so glad. One of the best things, to be honest, Tim, is to step away from coaching. It was probably the best thing I've done for myself and my family. Just really, and a lot less 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, I quit my job at Highline. I quit coaching, and I started my consulting business. And I'm like, okay, a little courage, a little. So it's been really good. So
cool. Well, I'll pass your information along to people that do that. I have a girlfriend that is in charge of doing, sessions in schools all throughout Kitsap County, and she leads them herself and does really good.
Amazing. Yeah.
She knows a lot of people. She always calls me the blackest white guy she knows.
Oh, that's great.
Well, I get it. I think I get it. I hope I get it. Just be kind. Treat people like you want to be treated, and that's half the fucking battle.
You're absolutely right.
Surround yourself with people that do good for you too. You're a product of the people that surround you on an everyday basis. So if you got a cancer, you got to cut it out. I don't hang out with Mark much anymore because, he just was so, I don't know, he's just so into himself. Of course I got loyalty to him and stuff like that, but just the way he puts other people down to put himself up, and how he thinks his way is the absolute golden ticket for a kid to, I think I've coached more professional soccer players than he has. And I think he could do it on one hand, and I need to take my shoes and socks off. So shut up with all that.
Absolutely. I think, it's, people, they grow, they have different interests, and sometimes zooming out of an environment that is a soccer environment is toxic. I think makes people that way too. A lot of, there's a lot of criticism in soccer, and a lot of folks that don't really mean well that are in soccer, and I think they need to go. We all know who they are, and
Bernie, Seth,
a little better. It
Gary
really
Heel.
is. Yeah, those folks are probably the worst of the worst, and in terms of we talk about providing a platform for kids to play and not thinking about their money making machine,
Right.
that's what it is. They have 60, like 4 or 5 teams. If you're on the 4th team at a premier level, why don't you allow that team to play it, in rec or some type of format that doesn't require them to pay thousands of dollars, so
right. Like another thing is like 90% of the players are rec. So why don't you honor that and build your rec system to make those guys premier players? You don't need to put them up there. It's buying shirts. It's a status thing. It's such bullshit, and it just drives me absolutely nuts. I mean, the coaching director out here, he is all about the premier level, but they play in the PSPL, and he makes threats with kids like, you got to come here. This is the best thing for you, and he coaches 4 teams, and it's just like, you're not making your commitment to one person, let alone all 4 teams, right? And then you're at this level, and that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tiers below, where you could be. So you're not making those players. And then there's no relationship with like Kitsap to say at 14, we've done what we can on this little island. We're pushing you 20 minutes down the road to a bigger club that plays at higher levels and stuff like that. Drives me nuts.
You're absolutely right.
I don't miss coaching at all, but I tell you what, it's a lot more stressful being a parent watching your kid play. And I'll tell you why. Because when you're a coach, you're thinking about 16 kids, right? So you're spread a little piece of yourself to every one of them. When you're mom and dad, you're just so focused on what Foos is doing. Like, goddamn, use your left foot. I told you 100 times, and coach isn't telling him this and that, It's so hard to just shut up when he gets in the car and let him talk to me about it when he's ready to talk about it, if he's going to talk about it. But he carries himself well. He practices as hard as he plays, which I respect. But it's a 3-hour commute there and back. So when the coach runs a shit session, when I could have got like 5 kids from down the street, I get really angry.
Yeah, I agree. That's a lot of driving.
I tell him there's another chapter in the book. You got to turn the fucking page. We've been on page 1 for 3 seasons now, and we don't have depth and balance and counterattack, and we don't have a set play to speak of. That Netherlands free kick was awesome.
That was amazing.
Yeah. Mess around like that.
Got him to move on. Yeah, it was a fantastic free kick. Yeah, it's coaching is really it needs to evolve. It needs to I've done a lot of work with Seattle United in terms of I've done some bias training for their coaches, and they've been very
my boy Carlos Enriquez?
Yeah,
he was my captain at Garfield for 2 years. I love him to death.
Oh, amazing.
And then he took over my job at Garfield.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, he's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked with him, George Singh, if you remember. So I've done a lot of work with them. They've been probably the most engaged group of
George needed it.
Yeah.
He used to fight all the time. He'd get drunk and fight people all the time. I'm just like,
I know.
Over what? He wanted to kill me one night, and I hadn't even had my first drink, and I was just like, what flipped on you, man? It's like, pack a lunch. It's going to take you all day, George.
No, George.
Tilbury fucking broke that up. There was another guy that was overly drunk all the time.
Tilbury, I see him. I saw him when I was at PAC. His son plays there. So
Rooster too. I think John Small. Do you remember that guy?
Yeah, I do remember John Small. Yeah,
his kid plays
at Seattle United.
Yeah, I think he's the same age as Vinny. Not as good though. Hey, puppy. All right, I'll let you go. Don't be a stranger.
It's so nice connecting with you, brother. I hope, to see you soon, and, let's keep in touch. I
Please.
appreciate you so much.
Thank you. All right, take care.
Take care, buddy.